This is the PR Podcast, a show about how public relations helps you tell your story to the world. We talk with great PR practitioners who have the skills, creativity, and just plain savvy to get their clients noticed. Now here's your host, Jody Fisher.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the PR Podcast. I'm Jody Fisher. Thanks for joining us. Well, have you got yourself a PR podcast plug yet? You know, it's going around. Our new feature here at the top of the show. It's where we promote your passion project. That's your blog, your website. Maybe it's your book. Maybe it's some great article you wrote that was published. Maybe it's your own podcast. Don't be shy. Drop us a line at the PR Podcast on Twitter. If you follow us, we'll follow you back so you can DM us. And let us plug your thing at the top of the podcast. It's your passion project. It's the thing that gets your engine running, right? And it's the thing that you want other people to know about. It's not your company. It's not your moneymaker. It's your fun thing that you do on the side. But let us know, let us share, let us brag and love on you. Send us a note and get your PR podcast plug in an upcoming show. On to our guest now. Let's get right into it. Tressa Robbins is an expert in customer onboarding and advocacy, content creation and management, copywriting, social media, public relations, and content marketing, and more. That is a mouthful. She's been a guest speaker, a lecturer, a panelist on social and traditional media relations strategies, PR measurement. There's something that I'm not great at. Communications, as well as personal branding strategies, particularly through the use of social media at various marketing, communications, and public relations industry events. She gets around. We find her in her home office today. Tressa, welcome to the PR Podcast.
Thanks, Jody. It's good to be here.
Thank you for reaching out and for getting in touch and coming on the show to talk about some really important topics. One of the things that we talked about offline that we both have an interest in, and that I thought was really interesting for folks to listen to here today, is the concept of mental health in public relations. We are public relations people. By nature, we are news junkies. And in the last couple of years, we have had to deal with, in some way, shape, or form, everything from the pandemic and COVID and death and horror to things like the war in Ukraine, which is just a couple of weeks old. It seems that we, as PR people, we are required to traffic in misery a lot of the days of the week. And that can really take a toll on people. And you've got some specific viewpoints on that and some expertise in that. Tell us about your background and about how it intersects with mental health.
Sure. Yeah, it's really, as you kind of stated at the top of the show, it's kind of a passion project, I guess, that I'm purposefully trying to be more vocal and outspoken on mental health and adding in my own personal analogies, because I think that people relate a little better if you're not just spouting statistics that you've read in a story, but you're talking about how it's affected you in your own life. So it has become kind of a passion project for me. It's not something that I deal with. I am not by no means a mental health expert, so nothing I say should be taken as medical advice. I guess I should throw that disclaimer up. None of this has been medically reviewed, but I have done a ton of research, and even more the last 2 years with the pandemic, paying more attention to those kind of things and trying to share that across social media, having more personal conversations with people about it. You know, I'm finding that the more I open up, if I just sort of, you know, it comes up in conversation and I say something that's personal about it, that people immediately then see that as a sign. It's okay. This is a safe space to talk, and they'll open up. So I'm trying to consciously be better at doing that, because I think we all need to be talking about it, especially those of us who have struggled with it in the past. It's been exceptionally difficult for many of us the last couple of years.
Yeah, you were saying, and only want you to go so as far as you want to go here, that,
Sure.
that you have had your struggles personally with mental health. Did you want to share anything about that path that you've walked?
Absolutely. I don't mind at all. Depression, there's so many things about mental health that physicians still don't understand. But depression does run in my family. Most of the women in my family have all been on antidepressant medications and or been diagnosed with depressive disorder over the years. So that part really kind of came to me in the 20s, in my 20s, not in the 20s. And it came through, I'll say it started as marriage counseling that turned into divorce advice. But that was my first real recognition and diagnosis personally. So, I mean, that I feel like has been almost my whole life. I was in college then, so that's forever ago. More recently, about 10 years ago, my mother had been battling cancer for several years. We thought she had it beat. It came back in full force, and that's when her last year, because I spent a lot of time there, I worked from her house, from her hospital room, and everything else. It was not long after that I began experiencing anxiety, and that was really scary because that was something I had no experience with, no family background, no history, So anxiety and depression are my two big personal struggles. And like I said, I think because of that, I pay more attention to those kinds of things. I'm hoping that it's helping me be more empathetic to other people, and so then they can be empathetic in return.
Absolutely. Empathy, a really important personal trait, I think, that we all need to have and need to continuously work on. Going back to mental health, depression, anxiety, it's my perception that I think as a society, we kind of pass off the word depression and what it truly means, right? You say, "Oh, I'm depressed," or "You're feeling down in the dumps," or "Oh, it's a lousy day," but depression is a serious condition which needs our full attention. And I think the profession that we've chosen, public relations, communications, the pressure that we inflict upon ourselves, the pressure that our clients and the news media, and let's just take media relations as an example, the deadlines and the needs and everything, we sort of volunteer for this very high pressure job that I think can really have, I'll go so far as to say, a devastating impact on us if we don't manage it properly, if we don't set the proper boundaries. Do you find that as well in your line of work?
Absolutely. I mean, I am not practicing public relations currently. I am actively practicing some, client communications and social media and blog writing and those kind of things. So I am still communicating. I actually feel fortunate in this day and age to not have to deal with media relations. So my heart goes out to every single one, and my appreciation and respect for everyone who's out there trying to pitch the media right now. It's so volatile. But you're right. I think that for those of us in the communications industry, specifically PR, our job is to be in the know, right? Like you said, news junkies, which I think is another term that people have started using more, and less in a positive sense and more in the way it really kind of should be, which is it's a habit, and it can be addicting, and it can be intrusive if you let it. So I think, there was an article that came out, I'm trying to think, may have just been in the last week or so, that posed a question, and of course it was a little clickbaity, but it was a really good story. That the headline was, "Is headline stress a real disorder?" And of course I clicked on it, but I did know who the author, I think it was, it wasn't NPR. maybe it was Neiman Lab. I don't know. It was one of the major organizations, or Pointner. I just can't remember at the moment. But apparently that really is. It's not like going to be in the medical dictionaries, but people are starting to realize and recognize that this constant stream of negative news and devastating news to some, we're just not equipped. People's bodies, whatever industry they're in, are not equipped to be in that constant state of anxiety. To your point, though, about using those terms casually, I'm not one that gets really sensitive to people saying, oh, that sounds crazy. Those kinds of casual terms, because I think they're just part of our dialect these days, our vernacular. But you are right when it comes to things like anxiety and depression specifically. We're all anxious at different times for good reason. It makes us sharper. It makes us plan better. It has positive forces. It can have some negative, but usually it's a very temporary thing. People who have anxiety don't always have the luxury of picking and choosing when those situations happen. And I think that's one of the big differences. And, yeah, the same thing with depression. I feel depressed today means I feel sad. But there's a big difference between being gloomy and having a real depressive disorder. And I think another thing that people don't realize is a lot of people were really shocked when I first sort of came out as having mental health issues, is because I tend to be very high functioning. Sometimes they call it silent depression. And I tend to come across as being very extroverted because I'm talkative. When with my anxiety, people don't realize that anxiety can do both things. It can make me excited and very extroverted for sprints through networking events and things and feel energized by it, but by the end, 110% drained and barely able to function the next day. And it's those kinds of things that I think people who casually use those terms don't understand.
And I think that that's our default. At least I'm speaking personally for myself. I mean, that's my default position. I am always on 11, to borrow a Spinal Tap phrase. I am always positive. I am always there because we work. And again, I'm specifically talking about what I do for a living, which is media relations, public relations, dealing with the press, dealing with their deadlines, dealing with their needs, and trying to match those up and match the client needs and get those stories placed and get those pitches out. And on top of it all, being able to carry around a constant reminder of everyone's deadline in the form of my phone and my email and my Twitter and everything else that's constantly going on. And to key in on what you said about being high functioning, I think that's, and also dealing with the subject matter that we're always dealing with, which is the news. And the news is everything that comes across the transom. And it's, 75% negative, I think, in general. It can be really challenging for us in this line of work to recognize if we truly have a problem with the subject matter and if it's starting to take a toll on us. And I've felt what you just described myself, where you go to a networking event or you go through a day where you're going to have a big day. Maybe it's an event day, or maybe it's just a high work day. There's a lot of stuff going on today. So you got to get it all done. You're banging away. At the end of the day, you're just a puddle on the floor. I mean, is that a sign that you're working it too hard and maybe you need to downshift?
Well, I think maybe. But in another way, I think we all have those days, whether it's a mental health issue or not. There are going to be days that literally just expend all of our energy, just use us up. But I think a lot of it is, how do you feel the next day? Are you still feeling the effects of that, or do you wake up with that positive, I'm ready to go again attitude, or maybe not when your eyes first open, but, when your feet hit the floor and you get that coffee and are you now feeling more positive about the day, you're ready to go? or are you what I refer to sometimes as feeling hungover? Almost feeling like you partied too much the night before, but yet you didn't, and you were in bed at 9 p.m. or something. I mean, it's a little silly, but it isn't, in that it can affect you over a longer period of time. I think that may be part of the difference. At least that's how I personally kind of qualify the differences.
If someone feels that they do have an issue, or maybe they just they know something's not right, and they don't know what it is, but they're looking for help, where can they go? Where are safe spaces that, because this is something that I would imagine is, you're looking in the mirror, you're like, I don't know what, something's wrong with me, I don't know what it is, but I don't know where to go. And there's probably an also associated emotions of, guilt, shame, embarrassment, on and on.
All of the above.
Right? How do you access help?
Well, there are numerous places you can access help. One of the first places I started is an organization called NAMI, which is the National Association or something like that of Mental Illness. They have a lot of free and community-based resources available. In our industry, I know that last year, PRSA, PRCA, the Institute for PR, CIPR, all those organizations, and I'm sure there are others, actually developed mental health resource centers. Now, a lot of that stuff was specific to mental health and well-being due to the pandemic. So some of it was more crisis-oriented than long-term, but the Institute for PR, I think, did a really good job in talking about, yes, COVID has caused this discussion to sort of bubble up a little bit more, even though it kind of had already been on the uptick before this, that there are related issues, physical issues. I mean, I think that's one of the things that the pandemic did for us. Two things. One is making these resources a lot more front and center. I mean, look, Edelman and a bazillion other large agencies and major companies out there have employee assistance programs where they have resources available through there. And you don't have to tell your HR manager or anything else. They make the information known. And it's up to you to get that help. But I think companies can do more, but I don't want to put the onus on private companies and organizations. I think to some extent, if we're not completely dysfunctional, and I understand that some people may become that way and need, hospitalization or whatever, but if we're not completely dysfunctional, then I think we need to take responsibilities for ourselves and seek those resources out. But I do think that it's great because of the pandemic that these industry organizations in specific have risen to the challenge of making those conversations easier to have or attempting to. And a lot of it is certainly with, pouring statistics and, surveys and research reports and things. But if you dig through them, you find some really, really helpful nuggets.
That's great. That's great to know, because I'm sure a lot of people need the reassurance to know that there are places that they can go to access help, even if they're not really sure what's going on. They just know that something's off. And that first step is the most important one.
There are, of course, social media groups for everything, right? And I do have a few tips before we sign off of things I've had to do, but I don't get on Facebook much anymore, just like about everybody else I know these days. But when I do, it's usually for one of two things. And one of those things is there are a couple of private Facebook discussion groups. Of course, you should never discuss anything in there that you don't want to potentially go public. But but again, I've been pretty open in general with what I struggle with. And I find that those little community forums where people can just say, you know what, here I'm having a crap of a day. Here's what's happening, or here's what's happening to me, and I don't understand why. Does anyone else have experience with this kind of symptom? You know, and it's not always great because people are people, but it is a very supportive and what I would consider kind of a safe environment. I mean, if you're mean to someone, they're going to boot you out of the group. It's a mental health group, for God's sake. But they are community forums. They're not necessarily moderated closely. And it's interesting to me that people do, you know, pretty much follow the rules.
Yeah, I've been in a few of those, not specifically for mental health, but for other things or other subject matter. And you're right that by and large, those community groups are very supportive, are very sort of on point, on subject, right? They don't let people rant about something that they're not there to actually talk about. And they are generally supportive and helpful and sort of guide people on the questions that they're asking. They can be reassuring. They can be uplifting. It's great. So in the era of doom scrolling, where we're going through, you know, Twitter or whatever other social media feed, you know, just to do our jobs that day, just find out what the heck is going on out there. It's good to know that you can also toggle over and find some support. That's really great. Wanted to pivot a little bit, if you don't mind, because
Sure.
something else that you really like to talk about, and something that you wrote that I found fascinating, because I know zip about this, is the metaverse. We're hearing so
Yes,
much
the
about
dreaded
this.
metaverse.
Oh my gosh, right? And whether it's NFTs or whether it's virtual real estate, or whether you wrote this terrific sort of all in one, what the heck is this all thing, and what does it mean to PR people? What does it mean to communicators? Did you want to take us through that just briefly on it's a terrific piece, and we're going to post the link.
Sure, that's great. You know, we've all been seeing it, right? I mean, the metaverse, NFTs especially, but if you read consumer publications and are into the tech, which a lot of us are, again, because of our jobs, we like to have the latest tech to communicate and things, but you have no doubt been hearing it almost ad nauseum for the past 6 months at a minimum, and that's only if you weren't really paying attention before that, which I kind of wasn't, to be honest. When I first started hearing about the metaverse, you know, it was all either related to cryptocurrency or fintech, you know, financial industry stuff, and I'm like, that doesn't apply to me. You know, I'm just a country girl in the Ozarks here. It's like none of that applies to me. But then I started seeing it in some of our industry trade publications, advertising and marketing, and not just in the U.S., but I read a number of UK publications that come into my RSS feed. And it just really started getting to be a lot of it. And I thought, okay, now I'm seeing it in our industry. Maybe I better check out what this is about. Like you, before I just kind of said, that's not something I need to know. I realized maybe I do need to at least have a cursory knowledge of it, right? So I can speak intelligently to what, you know, the metaverse is and what an NFT is and what cryptocurrency is. So to force myself to have to sort of dive into that little world there, I committed to writing an article on it, and that's the article that you're referencing. Wow, did I get myself in deep. I do want to say that it is a blog article. I think it's a couple thousand words, but it's not one of those that's like 25 pages. I ran into some of those, and it makes my head explode. Like I literally feel like the exploding head emoji. So yes, after about a month off and on of diving in really deep, you know, the idea of the metaverse right now is multiverses. It's mostly in the gaming space, which was kind of another reason I wasn't paying much attention to it. But now it's consumer brands are taking up space, and as you said something, you alluded to something about digital real or virtual real estate, which I'm still not sure I quite grasp the whole thing of that. But essentially, the metaverse does not really exist, at least not right now, and at least not in the original vision of what a metaverse was, which was supposed to be something completely decentralized, not owned by an entity. Sorry, Meta, formerly Facebook. So that's not there, right? We have all these different little metaverses that live in these different gaming platforms, and then of course Meta being the big one, trying to own that terminology. But then I started running across all these terms I didn't know: VR, AR, MR, XR, NFT. And I'm going, okay, my head's spinning again. So I kind of made myself a little glossary, which I put in the article. I just started thinking, you know what, everything I needed to learn, it's probably what they want to know too. I put in a section for why should I care, because that really was my initial thought, is why should I care about this? And found that while you don't need to be an expert yet, Jody, so you don't have to worry about that, but you probably should start paying attention to it, and you did. You read my article, so thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I mean,
and that was my come away, was you don't need to know it all right now, but you do need to start paying attention, because brands are getting in the space. If you work for a major consumer brand in communications, you've probably already had some involvement. If not, you still may have, from a communications or PR pros standpoint, in that if your company decides to, your marketing team decides to do an NFT drop or something like that, you may have to pitch it to the media. You may need to promote it on social media. You may need to communicate with your internal stakeholders what this is and what it's about. And, there's lots of different ways communicators are involved right now in it. Just not in big things you see that you're reading most of the time.
It's another one of those things where we may not be starting it, right? But we have to get up to speed very quickly on it. And we have to understand it, because we're going to be tasked sooner or later with explaining our clients' ideas to somebody else.
Exactly.
And so we really have to be
exactly
fast learners on this. I would imagine, I mean, the people I've seen involved in, whether it's cryptocurrency or NFTs or metaverse, whatever. And again, full disclosure, I'm a noob here. So I don't know really a lot of what I'm talking about here, but mostly what I've seen is either celebrities, entertainers, creators, and like you said, sort of big brands, whether that's, fast food or fashion or apparel, or like sneakers or something like that. Or even I'm thinking, maybe the next generation of it would be sort of big brands like colleges and universities, hospital systems, again, sort of like that big brand. And I'm thinking of some specific examples that I either work with or that I know here locally. I'm thinking that's kind of the next level of metaverse that we're going to go through. Given your research, would you agree with that or disagree with that, and why?
I think there's a lot of potentials for universities. I hadn't really thought about that, but that really struck me when you said that. Hospital systems, healthcare, they tend to be a lot more reserved when it comes to those kinds of things.
Yeah,
I think.
absolutely.
They're a little more cautious, and there are only so much they can do in the public space. That could be a little scary, I would think, if I worked for a hospital brand.
Okay.
I would probably steer clear of that for now, but that's just my own feeling of tentativeness. But universities, that's a great point. And actually, I could see where there could be a case for a university sort of setting up a student commons in Decentraland or Roblox or one of these other gaming platforms, to reach students and potential students, where students could come in virtually and ask questions about the university or, those kinds of things. That's actually kind of an exciting thought that you had there.
It sounds like I just gave myself some work. Okay, thanks.
There you go. No, because I do think that could be, it would be an interesting experiment to do. And I think that's where people need to think of all of this right now on our side of the industry. So when I mean, the PR side and general communications versus straight marketing and advertising.
Right.
I think it all needs to be about experimentation. Cautious, but dip your toe in the water. I think that's kind of the general gist of what I ended up with out of that whole piece was educate yourself, brainstorm ideas. You've already done that. And don't be afraid to experiment.
That is a great way to end that conversation there, because I do think it's something that we're all going to have to deal with. So we'll all cautiously dip our toe in, kind of the way we did with social media going back 15 or more years ago, and look where that's got us. So we'll get ourselves all up to speed. So thanks for talking about both of these really important topics here today, Tressa. We really appreciate it. We are going to segue into the rapid fire question portion of our podcast now. This is where we steal a page from inside the actor's studio and ask our guests a series of rapid fire questions, just meant to elicit a simple 1 or 2 word answer, sort of that gut reaction when you hear the question. So with your indulgence, Tressa, here we go. Rapid fire question number 1. What is your favorite news source?
MSNBC.
Good one. I don't think we've had that one on the show yet. All right. Rapid fire question number 2. What is your favorite social media platform?
Twitter, by far.
Yeah, that's a popular one. It reminds me, I've said this before, it reminds me of the old AP news feed. It just kind of keeps coming and coming, right?
Right.
Rapid fire question number 3, coffee or alcohol?
Diet Mountain Dew.
Oh, really? Oh, that's a new one.
I gave up coffee in the morning. I'm now a Diet Dew gal in the morning. I know there's probably people going, what?
No, whatever gets the engine running, as far as I'm concerned. All right, rapid fire question number 3. What's your favorite on the run food?
Atkins bars.
Yes, some form of
Atkins
bar. Everybody seems to have
bars.
some form of bar in their bag.
Yep.
And rapid fire question number 5, Tressa, what do you want to be after you finish this career?
Oh my gosh. That's really interesting. I don't have a rapid fire answer for that one, Betty. I'm not sure. I just kind of figured I would do this until I keel over. I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am these days too. All right. Well, this has been a great conversation. Please let people know how they can find you online.
On Twitter, I am at Tressa Lynn. It's TressaLynne. And pretty much all other platforms, I am at Tressa Lynn.
All right, fantastic. We will connect with you there, and we will be following your writings on the metaverse and more. Thanks again, Tressa, for spending time with us. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the show, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The PR Podcast, and send us a question or a comment. Our intro is by Christopher Appold. You can find him and his fantastic photography on Instagram at Christopher_APPOLDT. Check him out there and hire him for all your photography needs. You can find me online at Jody Fisher on all the socials and on the web at jodyfisherpr.com. We'll see you next time on the PR Podcast.